This is the Brave New Coin Crypto Conversation, hosted by Andy Pickering.
Hi everyone, Andy Pickering here. I'm your host and welcome to the Crypto Conversation, a Brave New Coin podcast where we talk to the people building the future in the Bitcoin, blockchain and cryptocurrency space. My guest today is Arie Trouw. Arie is the Chief Executive Officer and Chief Technology Officer at XYO Labs, and he also heads up, I think, the XYO Foundation, which is responsible for the open source development of the XYO Network. Welcome to the show, Arie.
Thank you very much, Andy. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you here, sir. Could you please do what we always do at the beginning of the show? Just love it if you could introduce yourself. I can see you've got a little bit of an interesting background in South Africa and in technology. You've done a few things. Please just lay it out at a high level for us.
Sure. My name is Arie Trouw. I've been an entrepreneur and software engineer for many years. I actually started using computers when I was about third grade in 1979, which probably dates me a little bit, but I was originally programmed on TRS-80 back in those days. But I've definitely spanned several generations of development as far as going to IBM PCs and Atari computers back then, and C#, now all these modern technologies, which are Web 2 and Web 3 technologies, which we're currently using. So I've been running software for a long time, and I started being an entrepreneur probably about 20 years ago, where I started making companies and mostly self-funded and had some success and had a couple of exits. So I've had some success as an entrepreneur, fortunately, which allows me to have some flexibility on what I work on in my life. And so one of the passions I have is understanding the shape and the relationship of data to the physical world, which is what a lot of XYO and XYO Labs is based on, is how to actually link those two things. And we're an oracle, so you can actually access data from the physical world with a high confidence and high certainty in software development and on both Web 2 and Web 3 platforms. So that's pretty much my background. I'm originally from South Africa, as I think you mentioned before. I emigrated in 1976 as a 7-year-old, so I practically grew up in the United States, but I did not speak English until I came here. I spoke Afrikaans when I came to the United States. So English is technically my second language, but I'd almost say that C might be my second language at this point.
Well, it's you and Elon Musk then. I'm sure you're very bored of that comparison, Arie.
Well, it's funny. I think I'm 1 or 2 years older than Elon Musk. We're born in the same city and potentially the same hospital. I don't know, but I feel like I'm losing. He has a couple extra zeros going on there compared to me. So, I'm not doing poorly, but I'm not quite at Elon Musk level right now. Also, he's doing some really amazing and cool stuff like rockets and those sorts of things. So,
of course. And look, I don't want to labor the point, but it's fascinating just listening to you, Arie. Even though you say, I think you said that you moved over to the US when you were 7 years old, but even listening to you, I guess it's the accent, but it's the inflection, it's the tone of voice, everything. Do people say that you sound like Elon as well?
Yeah, I get people ask me like where my accent's from, because I have this weird slight bastardized accent. My wife doesn't think I have an accent because we've been together for like 25 years, so she can't hear it, but people do every once in a while ask me. But I think it's actually more the word choice and sentence structure that is a little bit stranger for people, because once you speak other languages, like the order of words and how you select those words actually is a little bit different. So I wouldn't be surprised if his speech patterns, also being a software engineer, are probably more similar to mine rather than his accent, because I think he has actually a heavier accent than I do.
Yeah, well said. And you're exactly right. It is that kind of the inflection and the sentence structure. And all right. Well, interesting. So yeah, the XYO Network, you describe it as the world's first reality Oracle. So it's about empowering people to participate in the world's data economy through the validation of anonymous and secure geospatial data. So, I mean, that makes sense to me at a high level, Arie, but I still don't really know what you're talking about here. So, and I'm sure the listeners will be fascinated to find out, as I will. So, yeah, like to begin with, perhaps just at a high level, begin to kind of flesh out what you mean by the world's first reality oracle, and how the geospatial data plays into this, and yeah, how it relates to the data economy. There's a lot here, Arie. Dig in.
Okay. Well, I guess the way I look at reality is almost from a simulation theory standpoint. And whether, I have no idea if the simulation theory is correct or not, but whether it exists or not, the structure of the way that reality is in many ways can be decomposed the same way it would as if this was like a multiplayer game. And you can kind of think about the different aspects of the world, whether it's what you can see and perceptions, memories, all those different aspects of reality are basically, in some cases objective, in some cases subjective, but they're never 100% objective. It's really hard to know what actually is reality. Like, for example, I don't even really know if I am dreaming or awake right now or even exist. So nothing is known for certain in reality, and everything in math and in software engineering is, for the most part, certain. So a lot of it is actually bridging that gap of how do we take data in the physical world and in reality that can never be 100% certain, but it can be highly certain, and use that in a way that is confidence providing for the people who are consuming that data, especially in a situation where the providers of that data isn't a trusted source. So if we get that data, for example, from Google Places, like, well, I trust Google, and they did whatever they did to get those things right, and maybe they used the USPS database for this or that or whatever it is, but it's still like you have to trust them. So if you're going to make the system in a trustless system, how do you do that? How do you actually provide certainty for data, and how do you know that certain data is either Byzantine or was collected in the wrong place? And there are ways to do that. And there's whether it's reputation based and the history of a certain person in the network or device in the network reporting things, or if it's also as cross-referencing. Like for example, if you have two things which are observing the same thing or claiming to observe the same thing, if they're definitely not anywhere close to each other, because you can prove from other data that you have that they would have had to go faster than the speed of light to actually be the places that they are, that that's not true. So how do you actually make a system that can support individual ownership of data and individual decentralized data collection, and still have some sort of high faith in the certainty of that data, as opposed to the accuracy? And that's really what XYO sets out to do, is to do that so we can use that data on things like smart contracts, or even just in traditional Web 2, Web 3 sort of connected services.
Okay, and is it similar to the Oracle idea in the context of what Chainlink are doing? Because I think people will know what a Chainlink Oracle network is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's similar. We've actually used Chainlink for a couple of our demonstration projects, and Chainlink is probably more the link that, how do you actually get on Web 3 from Web 2? How do you connect these things, as opposed to how do you certify certain data, and how do you actually cross-reference that data? So we really focus on how we store the data. We have a blockchain system where we have each device has its own blockchain. It's called proof of origin chain. And so you can see where the origin of the data came from. It's immutable. And then we have bound witnesses where these different chains can be referencing each other. So I often equate it to people, like, imagine if you were traveling around the world and talking to people, and every time you came in contact with a person, you were forced to take a selfie on a Polaroid camera with them. And that selfie actually gives you two photos. It gives you one for yourself and one for them. And then they take one and you take one, and you have to put it into a stack that you keep. And the stack is permanently ordered in the order in which you took them. So that way, when you take these different photos over time, I can see I was near this person or that person, and you can look at that history and see if these photos are legitimate. And everybody else has to also basically be complicit to a fraud if the fraud actually were to happen. So you make the system large enough so that to be able to overcome the certainty of those things being correct, if you're a Byzantine actor, you have to practically rewrite the entire system because there's just so much in this tangle that keeps that data correct. So our structure of how we store our data and how we interlace all this data and find Byzantine actors, that's where I think we're quite a bit different from Chainlink, where Chainlink is really good at like connecting the different chains, the L2 chains, Ethereum, and all those sort of things. So I think they're more of a nervous system. So I kind of like to use the human design, for lack of a better term, for our components in our system. We have what we call sentinels, which is basically the senses on a person. You have eyes and ears and that sort of thing. We have bridges, which is the nervous system, and then we have archivists, which is your memory, and diviners, which is your thought process. And I kind of put them in that the bridge capacity, or where they connect things between each other. So they're kind of part of that nervous system. If you were going to decompose the blockchain world into those components, and their name Chainlink even specifically is for that, right? It's like you link chains. We're more in the memory, the archivist and the diviner portion of it, where we store these things in certain structures, and then we have a way with diviners to be able to go and analyze those to see the credibility of them.
Got it. So if that's the case, then Arie, I think the best way for people to understand this is if you run through some use cases. Love to hear some real world examples or future world examples of how this reality oracle can help solve some problems.
So quite a few of the use cases that we've been working on the last few years are evident in Coin. So Coin is our app that we made that has these use cases in it, and it's a really easy way for people to get involved as being a sentinel in our system. They can become an observer, basically, of the physical world and have those observations either passively or actively be part of our system, and they get rewarded for it with crypto. And so like in there, for example, we have a use case where wanting to know where a product is on a shelf in a store. So we would have a partner say, hey, I want to know, I paid for an end cap for my soda to be at the end of aisle 5 or whatever it is at the store. I want to go verify that. So what we do is we make these little micro tasks or micro requests for these people in Coin. And we have 3 or 4 different people go take a photo of where that should be. They scan the barcode on it and they say, yep, it was at the end cap, or no, I actually found it on the bottom shelf in aisle 3. So that way they can go and do this decentralized verification of things in the real world. That's really kind of difficult to do if you had to hire one individual person to go and track those down, because an individual person could potentially be corruptible, right? It's like the guy at the store says, yeah, we didn't put it at the end of the aisle, but here's $50. Just tell your partner that it was actually the end of the aisle. Where in our system, there's 3 or 4 random people who don't even know who the other ones are, who have to go and witness this, and they can't lie about it, because if they lie about it and they're the Byzantine actors, say the 3 other guys all say the same answer and they don't, they lose reputation for that. So their downside of actually being disingenuous there is larger than $50 or whatever they might get paid for. And the guy at the store doesn't even know who they are. So it's a great way to observe the physical world in a way that is to a large degree uncorruptible, because it just no one knows who's actually looking at it, and you don't know who the other observers are. It's almost like being a witness in a court case, but not knowing what the other witnesses are going to say. So you can't go and collude with them ahead of time, because if you don't know who those witnesses are. So that use case to me I've often been fascinated with, where it's a way to use humans with these micro tasks to be able to verify something in a close to mathematically correct way, because we can show that we randomly pick these people. A person can't claim this task. It has to be given to them. So I can't say, like, oh, I want my buddy to go do it also. So there's no way for them to force themselves into the queue. So that system has worked pretty well for us, where we can observe this for partners, and any kind of question that they have. Is a store still open, or what's the traffic in a certain area, or any of those things. What's the weather, even if they really care about what the weather is. So those multi-party observations, especially in the cases where if they're near each other, we can have them even have their phones, their devices corroborate the fact that they were both there, which is a way to actually bind that data as well and get that certainty without having a central authority go through it. So that use case has always been kind of fascinating with me. The other one also is it's the audit trail for something. For example, I always use the example of ice cream. If you've ever gotten an ice cream bucket that you bought at a store and that bucket had melted at some point, but then it refroze. So you get it and you open it up, you can tell it's not quite right. It's a little gummy and it's definitely had a problem, but no one really knows where it melted, right? And so for the store to know like where along its travels did it get melted is difficult. They can actually, with technology like ours, they can have our system basically keep this audit trail, which is immutable. No one can scratch off like a line of the ledger, or they can't tear out a page of the ledger, because once it's been signed, it's evident that it's been signed. And if you remove one of the blocks, the missing block is glaring because it doesn't have the previous hash from the other one. So having these audit trails where they're unchangeable after the fact, and you can even prove where it came from. Say for example, I want to use a engine in an airplane, I can prove it came from Boeing as opposed to another company which could have produced it. So you can prove that it actually came from the origin because it had scanned and that original warehouse and made a chain of connections between that and where I am right now. So those use cases all to me they're fascinating, because what they really do is they take the physical world, which is so infused with uncertainty, and they try to provide as much certainty as possible about the answers.
Yeah, that's interesting, Arie. So I think I understand now. So you're kind of talking about creating, I suppose it would be a data economy, really, powered by tokens and individuals and anyone who wants to participate. And you could pose effectively pretty much any question about what you want to understand about what is going on in the physical world, if such a thing exists. And then anyone who's participating in that economy is incentivized, if they think they know the answer, to contribute their answer to that question, right?
Correct. That's like the reactive data approach thing which we have. I call them micro gig economy, where it's small payments for these little pieces of data. And we also have the passive approach where, say, for example, you want to know how noisy it is at a concert. If I have 3 or 4 or 5 people there with their phones, I can just hear with the microphone how noisy it is. I don't have to actually ask them to do anything. Just the fact that they're there, I can passively observe that information as well. So in some cases, it doesn't even require a person to be given a task and to go and do it. It can be done without their interactions at all.
Yeah. So it sounds great, Arie. The difficulty, of course, is you need to bootstrap the network. You need to scale the network. You need to have enough users on the network, liquidity in the token. All of those different problems, which I'm sure you are working on as we speak. So I suppose it all comes down to how do you make this work in the real world, and what kind of time frame do you anticipate? How do you get users into the network?
So it's a very good question. And I think that's actually one of the places where we're far ahead of many of the projects that are out there. We saw that also when we first started this off. And our original idea was, well, we'll have people collect data, and then when it gets used, we'll pay them out for it. So kind of like preemptively, they collect it, and they have to wait 6 months maybe for whenever that data gets valuable. And we found that people aren't willing to, they're not that patient. They don't want to wait for that. And also we didn't have enough users. So what we started doing was we started with Coin, paying people upfront for the data which we're collecting from there and for those actions, so that they continue to provide that for us. And then when we have our partner buy that data from us, we become the intermediary at that point. So we can give them, it's almost like a payday loan. We pay them ahead of time for it. And in some cases, we pay a person slightly more or slightly less than what they should have gotten paid for that data, because of the fact that we have to kind of average it out. But given the fact that we decided to start paying people proactively for their data as opposed to reactively for their data, we've had great growth in Coin. And so our Coin app right now, we have to date over 4 million installs of that app, and a very, very large network. I think it's possible we're one of the, if not the largest active sets of nodes for a blockchain network of this type in the world. And so we grew our network, especially our network of Sentinels, substantially over the last 2 years using the Coin app. And that was the primary purpose of the Coin app. So we've now established that we have coverage all over the world. If I look at my heat map on the world, the U.S. and the European areas are very covered. India is very covered, and any population city or center in the world for the most part is covered. If Nigeria or South Africa or Australia, you can see on that heat map the areas which are populated and which ones aren't. So we have very substantial coverage right now in the world as far as where people are and are able to report on things that are going on in the real world. And this year, what we're doing is we're continuing to expand our buy side of the marketplace, where we have more and more partners coming in, because now we have the ability to supply them with this data. They can buy this data and use this data for their different purposes and put different requests into our system to do that. So I agree with you. That's the really difficult aspect of getting a system like that working. And also over the last 2 years, we've been listed on quite a few exchanges. We have some really good liquidity for our token. And we've even had some customers that playing the metagame of coin really well over the last 2 years and converting their in-app virtual currency called coin into XYO at the right time, and then holding on to it. They have made well over $1 million. We have some case studies which shows users that in using coin for a year made I think it was $1.5 or $2 million total in rewards, primarily because they got the XYO, and the XYO price had increased during that time. So I feel like we've made much bigger steps on the critical mass issue and the buy side and sell side portions of our economy than the majority of projects out there.
Very nice then, Arie. If people are listening to you talk then and they think, well, this sounds quite interesting, I'd love to get involved with this coin app and start participating, etc. What is the easiest way for them to do that, and where should they go?
Well, if they're interested in buying the token, they can go on Coinbase or there's a KuCoin. There's a whole bunch of different token exchanges out there that have our token listed on there. If they want to use the Coin app, they can go to the App Store or Play Store, and they can download the Coin app on there and create an account, and they can start earning coin and then redeeming it for XYO as soon as they want to. We also have redemptions for other things like PlayStations or Xboxes or trips and those sorts of things also in the app. But something I think north of 90% of all redemptions are for XYO tokens in the app at this point. So if they want to get involved and become a Sentinel, they can do that. If they're a developer, they can go to our XYO website, and we have documentation on our SDKs there. If they want to actually integrate our SDKs into their existing apps or new apps, they can do that as well. So we basically have an entry point for the data consumers, which is contacting us to buy data from us, the data producers, which is using the Coin app, and the developers by going to the XYO website and starting to use our open source SDKs.
Great. And I can't resist, Arie, you talked about simulation theory right at the beginning of the show. You've obviously thought about this a fair bit. What, I don't know if you want to put it in kind of probability terms or percentage terms, but how do you think about simulation theory? What is the likelihood that we are in fact just in the matrix and this is some kind of grand artificial world built by another intelligence? How do you think about this?
I personally think that there's a very high likelihood that there is another layer out there, for lack of a better term, where there's we're in a bubble of some sort that limits our perception of what reality is and what the universe is. And there's a transcended layer where whether it's getting out of the game and being one of the players, or we're in a simulation and there's a bigger simulation around us, or there's a different reality around us. But I do think that there is a reality that basically is a superset of our reality, and that we're currently at least constrained to a smaller portion of that. So simulation theory would definitely support that view where we're in the simulation, but there's more to the universe than just the simulation. There's potentially multiple simulations or infinite number of simulations, and there's potentially also a larger world somewhere. So I'd say that there's close to 100% odds that that there's more to the universe than just us and our universe, that there's that bubble outside of it of some sort. Now, having the hubris to know what it is, that's something I don't have. I have no idea what that is, but it would be nice to, one day when your days are up and you die and you wake up and you find out that you're actually an alien playing this simulation, and maybe you can just, start a new game and play again on a different level or a different difficulty, or a different era. That would be a really nice way to find out that this is actually a simulation theory. But my assumption would be that if it is a simulation, the only way to make the simulation fun and only way to make it work is to be absolutely sure that nobody in the simulation actually knows for sure that they're in a simulation. Because as soon as that fourth wall is broken in the simulation falls apart, basically. So I think the odds of me or anybody else finding out or being able to unequivocally prove that we're in a simulation or something similar is very, very low, just because it would basically shatter the glass effectively.
Yes, indeed. Fascinating thoughts, Arie. Thank you very much. I enjoyed that, and I reckon that's probably a good place to go to a break, because if we keep talking about simulation theory, perhaps, we'll start to spot those glitches in the matrix, which is never a good sign. So instead, we'll go to a break, and then we'll come back and we'll finish off with the very famous Crypto Conversation Hot Take Round.
For crypto indices and benchmarking, Brave New Coin's powerful indexing engine can calculate high-frequency intraday and end-of-day indices for a wide range of index products. Brave New Coin's custom indices team delivers experienced consultancy, premium data, and trusted calculation. Contact BNC today to find out more.
All right, we're back, and I'm with Arie Trouw. He is the CEO and CTO XY Labs, and he heads up the XY Foundation. Arie, I like to finish each podcast with a quick round of rapid-fire crypto conversation hot takes. Are you up for it?
Yes, definitely.
All right, you're a good talker, Arie, so, quick, snappy answers, hot take style is how we generally do this, but please, there's, no right or wrong way to play. First question for you is, where do you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-chain opportunist spectrum?
I'm definitely not a Bitcoin maximalist.
Simple as that. I like it. Okay, what would you say is your firmest conviction crypto opinion, Arie?
My favorite one?
Firmest conviction crypto opinion.
Conviction.
Yeah.
That just because you have a hammer, everything shouldn't look like a nail. I think in crypto right now, there's a lot of people have that problem, that they think that any problem can be solved with crypto, and I think that there are a handful of problems that can be solved really, really well with crypto, but we should not be applying it to everything.
Yeah. Bill Gates famously said that we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. So, I mean, maybe love to hear your perspective on this, Arie, because you said, you've been around perhaps longer than a lot of people listening to this podcast, and you've been, a software engineer all the way through, so you've very much been part of the early days of the internet. You've seen, built and participated in the rise of Web 1 and Web 2. Now, as we kind of transition into what we're calling Web 3, Web 3, or the internet, blockchain, metaverse, everything, what does it look like in 10 years' time, do you think?
I think it definitely will have a tipping point, probably before 10 years are up. It's taken a little bit longer already than I expected to get to where we are right now. But like any of these things, there's going to be a tipping point where suddenly things kind of fall into place. One of the things I don't believe with Meta is I don't think that the use of virtual reality is going to be very widespread long term. I think virtual reality is fascinating and it's interesting, but to me, augmented reality is much more important and much more interesting. So I think using meta concepts in the meta world as an overlay for reality is much better. It's a much more useful product, and it's something which also XYO focuses on as far as how do you actually connect those two. So to me, overlaying reality and the metaverse is the key for the next 10 years.
Nice, I like it. Well, William Gibson famously said, of course, Arie, that the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. With that in mind, can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people just aren't really aware of it?
I think the pace of human obsolescence is actually something which is happening a lot faster than people realize, where as we're being forced to automate things, automate different tasks, robotics are starting to get there to basically combat some of the increased cost of labor and also inability to even get labor. And we have this problem right now after COVID. There's a lot of people who have not returned to the workplace. So companies have had to be very resourceful in being able to figure out how to actually get things done with automation and with technology. And so I think that one-way street of automating the world in such a way where you need less and less people to run companies and having a larger portion of the population potentially being unemployable is a slippery slope, which I think we've started to slide down. And I don't think people realize how fast that slope might go once it tips.
Yeah, fascinating. So if that's the case, I guess one counter argument to that, of course, is that as much as all these traditional occupations, jobs do start disappearing due to automation and factories and also things, external factors such as the pandemic, we get, the argument is that there's always going to be new jobs or new occupations or new things to do that are enabled by technology. So an example of that would be what I'm doing now. I'm a crypto podcaster. No one knew what a crypto podcaster would have been 5 or 10 years ago. Just one example. Or like an NFT trader. That certainly wasn't a thing 5 years ago. I'm not sure what my question here is, Arie, but how do we solve this? UBI, where does UBI fit into this?
I'm actually a proponent of UBI. I wouldn't say I'm a fan of UBI, but I think at some point we're going to have UBI because of this. Because the problem is, as much as we have all these new opportunities for people to do things like podcasting or making music or all of these technology-enabled things, that also is not evenly distributed. It's not. We're not adding the ability for a person who does not know how to use a computer to do those things. We're definitely adding those options and those opportunities at the top end of the spectrum and not at the bottom end of the spectrum. So I think you're going to have a pressure at the bottom end where you're going to have more and more people who are unemployable. And we already have UBI to some degree as far as if a person is sufficiently disabled or that sort of a thing. The government helps them exist by giving them money. And I think that bar for society where we don't expect a person to be able to make enough money for themselves by working, given their education level or their abilities or whatever it is, that bar is going to go higher because all the opportunities that are going to be existing are going to become more and more difficult, I think, in that case. And so if you see that in job growth right now, where a lot of the job growth is software engineers and professionals and highly trained individuals, it's not necessarily job growth in McDonald's employees, for example. And so I think it's going to be required for it to exist just because we have to accept the fact that we have to distribute the wealth of our automation, right? And we can't just say, well, let's have automation and all these different technologies just benefit the rich. We have to have it benefit everyone.
All right, I like it. Let's get a little bit weird just for a second though, Arie. We'll get even weirder. Time to zoom out. What do you see as the long-term future for the human race? Do you see dystopia or utopia, or perhaps a breaking of the simulation, or we build our own simulations? Where does it all lead?
I would love to say it's utopian, but unfortunately, my gut tells me it's not utopian, and largely it's because human nature is so hard to fight. Even if you look at the current world events, that it doesn't matter how much there is to have. People are still greedy. They want the grass that's greener on the other side, or they want more of this or more of that. So I think that it doesn't matter how much we have to go around, people will still fight to have a bigger pie of that. And so the haves and have-nots is something which I think Star Trek type worlds aren't going to be able to solve, even though it would be great if they could. And just it's human nature. So unless we somehow get to the point where we can have sufficient enlightenment by the majority of people out there to get past some of those petty have and have not issues. I think, if anything, the more sharp tools we have to be able to fight with each other, the more dangerous the world becomes. So I'm concerned. I'm concerned that the world's going to become dystopian. I'm concerned that we're going to end up blowing ourselves up with nuclear weapons or destroying the planet because of environmental change. This is one place where I agree a lot on with Elon Musk, is the fact that we need to hedge. We need to hedge whether it's going to Mars. We need to hedge as far as being able to have protected areas, seed banks, and those sorts of things. Because unfortunately, getting our politicians and getting the world to cooperate to actually solve these problems has not seemed to have a lot of success so far.
Hard to argue with that. All right, let's start to finish this off, Arie. The final question seems appropriate. What is your favorite science fiction book, film, TV show, or universe?
I'd probably say that let me say a movie and a TV show. So there's a movie called Gattaca, which I'm really fascinated with.
Yes.
And it really talks about it's kind of a dystopian future where you have the haves and have-nots, and how people are judged basically on their gene pool as opposed to their actual drive and their ability to do things. And there's quite a few great quotes in there. As far as I think my favorite quote in there was when the one son asked the other son, how did you always beat me in the swimming thing? And because they would swim from shore out and then back. And he said, well, it's simple. He just never saved, and he never saved energy to swim back. He just swam as far as he could. And so basically, it's like leaving it all out there is something which people need to learn how to do. And then as far as TV shows go, there's a TV show called Devs, which is about like the data and the world, and how you can actually look at the past and look at the future if you can actually understand all the current states of the simulation theory effectively. And so Devs uses quantum computers or something, quantum magic and hand waving to solve that problem, where they can actually look back, and visualize Christ, for example, 2,000 years ago, and kind of see that video by just looking at the highest probability of all the different data points that have taken to get to where you are now. So I think their view on how the data of the past and the data of the future, and there's only basically one future based on the current state of things, is a very powerful commentary. So I would definitely recommend Devs for people, and then also Gattaca, of course, if you haven't seen that.
Yeah, fantastic choices, Arie. Yeah, I'm familiar with Gattaca. It came out in 1997, so a little while ago. Starred Ethan Hawke, but very, very good film, and ahead of its time. Haven't watched Devs, have heard of it, but sounds like a good one as well. Thank you for coming on the show, Arie. You've been good. You've been a great guest. Have enjoyed it. Please close it out by telling the people where they can go to find you on Twitter or wherever you like to hang out in this wonderful simulation that we're all trapped in, and where they should go to learn more about this reality oracle that you guys are building. Okay.
Well, thank you very much, Andy, for having me on today as well. If you want to find me, I'm easy to find. Arietrouw.com is my domain name, so you can go there. You can see all my socials there. I'm also Arie Trouw on Twitter. If I haven't gotten my blue check mark yet, which I'm still working towards on Twitter, but hopefully one of these days. So follow me on Twitter to help me get my blue check mark. And then, of course, if you want to start with XYO, go to XYO.network. You can read about it there, and there's some dev tools there. And then if you want to use Coin, just search for Coin or the Coin app on the App Store or Play Store, or go to coinapp.co, which is the website that tells you all about the Coin app. So those are all the different locations you can find me. So tweet at me, and I'll be happy to tweet back at you.
Brilliant. Appreciate you coming on. All the best, and bye for now.
Thank you very much. Bye.
All right, there you go. That was Arie Trouw. Yeah, I enjoyed that. It's funny, sometimes, I wasn't really too familiar with Arie or his work prior to talking to him today. And sometimes those podcasts that you don't know too much about the guest or the project, and you're not sure how it's going to go, sometimes those are the ones that you really enjoy the most. Like I did enjoy talking to Arie, maybe just because obviously very interesting guy, got some interesting perspectives, super smart guy, and so those guests sometimes you just kind of get out of the way and let them tell their story, because that's how you get a high quality listening experience, I suppose, for the listeners, which is all we really try and do here at the Crypto Conversation. So thank you to Arie, and thank you to you, the listeners, for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the Crypto Conversation so you know when each new episode drops, and also please do feel free to give us a nice 5-star rating in Apple iTunes or the Apple Podcast app, wherever you live in the world. But that is today's show. Thanks, team. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave New Coin.